Specialist 4, Jerry McNelly, United States Army, Vietnam. Folks, extra special feature here today. My second interview with Jerry McNelly. I interviewed him the first time. It was July 14, 2006 in Phoenix, Arizona, almost 18 years ago. And I've been anticipating this interview going back to Phoenix. It was in Scottsdale, Arizona, April 19th last week. Interviewed Jerry again for the second time. Oh, such a great story. We went almost 2 hours, folks. For those of you who want us to let the camera keep rolling, we did, and we shared so much together during this interview. Had dinner that night, and it was just a special, special time. Jerry, I love you, brother. Jerry served in the United States Army, 1st Air Cav, D Company, 2nd Battalion in 67, 68 in Vietnam. And he tells, well, you've seen his first story, most of you, almost 1 million views so far in Jerry's first story. And he just tells it in such a way, he's such an orator. He just really has a way of sharing words, and I just so appreciate what he did here. So I'm going to get right into it here. I'm not going to say much at the introduction here, but I'm just so grateful. I went to Arizona last week, and it was just a great time. I want to thank Michael and Darlene Sarofsky for helping me to go down there, you guys. Oh, you know what you mean to me, I hope, and to my work. I so appreciate you and your willingness to help me tell the stories, these voices of history, and you enabled me to go down there last week. Also want to thank Trish Hansen Desert Hills. We actually did the interviews there in Scottsdale with their facility there. Thank you so much, Trish, and I hope to be working with you again and going to speak at Austin's history class up in Flagstaff. So, folks, my heart's so full. I just can't wait to get into this story. I did 8 interviews last week. I'm going to share them here in the next couple of months, probably. I did a second interview with Ed Masterson, whom a lot of you have seen, Mark Bartlett, Terry Woolman, and some surprises. They were all great. They were all excellent. And I thank God for this. The journey continues. And I did a short little 1-minute video of my week last week, and I hope you watched that. Okay, I can say so much more, but let's let Jerry speak again. After 18 years, we reconnected, and you're going to have to hear this interview. It's really, really good. So God bless you. Thank you for watching and listening and sharing these stories, and I will talk to you on my next broadcast. All hands on deck, Jerry McNelly. Jerry, I just want to first thank you for agreeing to do another interview with me. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but your story, let me go back. When I started my work, I was producing documentaries. So as I would listen to an interview, in my head, I'm already editing it. You know, I'm thinking, that's it, I'm going to use that, I'm going to use that. And then when I went back through all the stories, like I'd interview 60 people for a film, and I had to cut out 59 hours because the documentary is 60 minutes. So all that 59 hours of video nobody's ever seen. About 2 years ago, along the path on my YouTube channel, I would at times produce little segments of like your interview or others, and just try to get people interested in what I was doing. But until I released your story about 1.5 years, going on 2 years ago, I didn't have the interest. But when I released your story, it took off. And from that point to now, I'm now sharing the complete unedited interview that I did with the veterans. I never would have thought I would ever have done that. So consequently, when I'm doing the interviews, it's not like a complete narrative of an interview today. So it's bits and pieces for me. So it's an interesting challenge to do that. But your story, I don't know if you know, you've had almost over 750,000 views. You're approaching 800,000 views.
Amazing.
So to say that your story has had more views than any of my other stories, not that the other stories aren't good, not that yours was the best, but your story just resonated with, and still is. It's an ongoing thing. In addition, my Voices of History radio station airs your story and all the other stories on the YouTube channel 24 hours a day around the world. Over 50 countries have tuned in. So that my whole purpose of this is to educate, is to preserve our history and to honor our veterans and have them recognize, have people recognize our veterans and the freedoms we have. So I wanted to start with that because your first interview was just like, I could probably almost quote it and the things that you went through. So we may talk on some of that, but that was a long introduction. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. What you're referring to that in that interview that we did before was my first night. The Tet of '68 was a very active time in Vietnam. A lot of combat, a lot of people that ordinarily would not see combat were drawn into it, like Saigon, and of course the places that got the publicity is where the reporters were, and they just weren't out there where we were, or the Marines were, or the 1st Cav Division, or some of the other units. They just weren't there. So you really didn't get to hear the stories through a reporter's eyes of the things that happened to many, many troops, or a lot of us that, in fact, the only person that joined our unit that I'm aware of was an Australian guy joined us for 3 or 4 days. But as far as American reporters, they said, no, we're not going to go with that group.
Tell me how old you were again when you went to Vietnam.
I was 19 when I went there to Vietnam, and I returned stateside on my 21st birthday.
And what year did you graduate from high school?
1966.
So during high school, Vietnam was going. What were your thoughts about, oh no, I'm going to get drafted. Oh no, I want to go in. I mean, tell me your thoughts and your peers.
The only memory that comes to mind, because I really didn't think about it that much. I was in high school. I didn't think about the war. I thought about chasing girls and having fun. Is I was sitting at the dining room table with Mom and Dad and my brothers and sisters, and the TV was on in the other room, and Dad said something about the war, and out of nowhere I said, well, you know, I'm going to be in that war. And I was a senior in high school, and my mom hit me upside the head, and she said, don't you talk like that, you're not going. Well, didn't work out that way. I actually ended up there. And why I would make that statement, I don't know. I guess I either told the universe I wanted to go, or I had a premonition of some kind. I just don't know why it
was it like, so you were drafted or you enlisted?
I volunteered for the draft.
Okay. So how do you volunteer for the draft?
I went down to the draft board and I just told them I want to go to Vietnam, but I'm not signing up for 4 years. And they said, okay, well, we can put you in the volunteer draft section, you'll get your notice, and that's what happened.
But wouldn't you have been drafted anyway, or not?
I don't know.
Okay.
I just don't know. I mean, I know there were a lot of guys I went to high school with. We were all the same age, and they were certainly well qualified to be drafted, and they were not.
But what were your thoughts about war in general at that young age? Were you thinking like, yeah, or I want to do it, or I want to serve my country? You had that commitment to duty?
That is a question that brings to mind a couple of thoughts. One, I was 19 and my testosterone weighed more than my brain, so let's go play war. And I felt it was an honorable thing to do because my country needed me, or I believed they needed me. The other is on the darker side of that. Those people that were cowards ran to Canada. And a Democrat named Jimmy Carter brought them all home and restored all of their rights. And if that was not a slap in the face of the veterans that went over there and paid the price of serving their country, I don't know what is. And something else I don't understand, and all I get is anger when I ask a veteran, how could you raise your hand and swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States and then vote for people that want to destroy it, the Democratic Party? I don't understand that. How honorable is your commitment? And all they do is get mad, call me names, and storm away, which seems to be the status quo for that group.
Yeah, that's a point I'm going to talk with you about later at the end of the interview too. But so you got your draft notice?
I did.
And was it a great day?
I was sitting in English 101 at Glendale Community College when I opened the letter. And at that time it became, as soon as I read the letter, it became reality. It was no longer a vision of grandeur. I'm going to go serve my country and all that. All of a sudden it was real.
Had you traveled much at that young age or been out of wherever you were living at the time? I mean, had you seen the world?
We lived in a small town in the west end of the valley here in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'd been there, I've been over there for 70 years. Mm-hmm. So I was young when we moved there.
Mm-hmm. So tell me what happened. You got your orders, eventually you're shipped off. What was basic training again? Tell me.
Well, the first thing that happened is I reported I got a notice that I was to report to a place in downtown to go through induction. And so I went down there and had a physical. And the humor in that is, here's a bunch of couch potatoes standing in two lines. And at the end of the line is a guy that has more muscles than the rest of us put together. And he was the #1 heavyweight college wrestler in the United States. And for some reason, he didn't have to go because he had one flat foot. And the rest of us had to ship out. So I ended up going down to the airport at Sky Harbor and waiting for a plane to arrive. And the plane came from California, and it was partially full with other guys that had been drafted. And I sat next to a gentleman named Jim Davis, who I have the great, great respect for. If anybody knows about the 2nd Battalion, 12th Cav, when we were surrounded outside the city of Way, and we had to leave our dead bodies there because we couldn't get them out. There were too many enemy, the weather was bad, there was a chain of command screw up, it's a senior chain of command screw ups, and we were left on our own. In fact, our battalion commander was told by General Tolson, we can't help you, do the best you can. And we were completely surrounded. The 400 of us were surrounded by about 2,000 enemy troops. In fact, there were so many of them, they actually dug a trench around our perimeter and the outside of our perimeter to contain us. Their purpose was to go into Way and bring the wounded out and send other troops in. And we were trying to stop that. But military intelligence didn't know that that enemy regiment was there. And so we walked into that beehive. And on the second night, we were out of ammunition. We didn't have any food to start with. And on our second night of being surrounded, we walked out of that event in the height of a storm. And because we couldn't get the bodies out, Jim Davis pulled all those bodies into the mortar pit and covered them up. We retrieved those bodies a couple weeks later, but I don't know if I could do what Jim did. That was an amazing thing, and he's told me how difficult that was to do. Anyway, we walked out of there, out of 400 guys, 191 of us survived, and a bunch of them were wounded, but we couldn't get them out. So that night we found some group of volunteers went out and looked for a weak position in the enemy border, and they found a hole where we could get through. And that second night at 8 o'clock during the storm, in the pitch black of night, we were hanging on to one another, and the line of us just walked right through enemy camps and walked out without a shot fired. And that's how we survived.
That was the battle away? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a battle away. And we were on the northwest side of the city of Way. And so anyway, I don't know if I answered your question
No,
or not.
what we did was we jumped from going into the military, Jim Davis, to the battle away. Did you see that? We went.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We're traveling through time right now.
Yeah.
You're my eyes and ears to this doorway of the past. And let's just, we're going to get into all this. But so you processed, you go to basic training. We don't need to go through all that. And then you ended up in Vietnam. What was the day you went to Vietnam?
Well, I did basic training at Fort Bliss, Texas in the summer, July and August.
Was Jim with you?
Yes.
Okay.
We were together the whole time.
Did you know him at that time, or you just met him?
Met him on the plane.
Okay.
Never met him before. We did basic training together. Then they shipped us off to Fort Polk, Louisiana for infantry training. Jim and I were still together. We got to Fort Polk, and we did some infantry training, and then into the infantry training a few weeks. A handful of us, Jim and I and a couple other guys, were selected to go to mortar, what they called indirect fire training, or mortar training. And so Jim and I did that together as well. And then we got a 30-day leave, and Jim went home and I went home. And then I met him again in Fort Lewis, Washington, and we shipped out to Vietnam together just a couple days before Christmas.
Did you go on a commercial flight, or did you go as a group?
There was the commercial flight was just veterans going to Vietnam, and Jim and I sat together as we flew to Vietnam.
Was it like a continental flight with the stewardess and all that?
Oh, yeah.
And you flew from here to here to here, and then?
Well, we flew, I believe we flew direct, but I'm told we stopped in Guam to refuel, and I'm told that's where the stewardesses got off the plane, and then just the GIs went into Nam. And then I don't know what I was expecting. You know, you see it on television. So when the door opens, I expect to hear explosions and be running from the plane because they got the stewardesses off and we're going into a war zone. So, you know, I anticipated something that wasn't that way at all. We landed in Cam Ranh Bay, and it was a huge facility. I mean, it's a city. It's so big. And you get off and there's people driving around in civilian cars and people in shorts and t-shirts. And I mean, it was just nothing like what I expected. And so we get off and I don't remember how we transported from the plane, but they took us over to these barracks, and we were in these barracks for a few days. They easily could have waited till after Christmas, but for some reason they sent us over a couple days early. So we didn't do anything for 3 or 4 days, and it was a day or two after Christmas, and they came into the barracks and called out some names, and we went and got on a helicopter, a Chinook, and they took us to a place called An Khê, where we did, which was the first Cav training headquarters for Vietnam. And in An Khê, we went through additional training, and Jim was there with me. And then, after our training, Jim and I were put on a helicopter together, and we flew to a place called LZ Leslie. And when the helicopter landed, there were 4 of us new guys, FNGs or green guys or whatever term you like. And when we got off the helicopter, the first shirt told told Jim to go to the mortars. He told me to go down to where the machine gun was And I said, I'm not trained in a machine gun. And he said, you'll learn. And so I went down to the bunker and figured out the guys in the bunker that were on the machine gun taught me how to use it. And of course, that's the story that's in the video that we did in '06.
So, okay, so you're in country. What month, do you remember the day, actual day in the month that you landed in Vietnam?
To the best I can recall, it was December 23rd, 1967.
That's okay, yeah. And you're in the first Cav?
I was in the first Cav. I wasn't assigned to the first Cav at that time.
You were, okay.
I just was in a barracks waiting to see where I was going.
Mm-hmm.
And they came in and called out some names, Jim Davis and myself and some others, and we went to the first Cav training headquarters in Ankei. And that's where we had in-country training for, I don't know, 3 to 5 days, something like that. And then we were shipped out to LZ Leslie.
Mm-hmm. How long did you stay at LZ Leslie?
I was incorrect in the original video. I thought it was the first night we got overrun, but I have since learned it was the second night.
Okay.
And then I was there. So I was at LZ Leslie a total of 4 days.
Mm-hmm. And then where did you go? Just out in the field? I mean,
no, we were. Our company had been so decimated when we were overrun by the enemy that those of us that were still alive, they took us back to a place called LZ Ross, which is 3 or 4 miles away to the east, which is where the rest of the battalion was. And so we joined the rest of the battalion, and over the next 4 or 5 days, we got a lot of new guys into our company.
But you're relatively new.
Yeah, I was, at that point, those guys thought I was the old guy. I'd only been there for a week at most.
So why did they call it LZ? Because I think a LZ is a landing zone that a helicopter goes in. Were these landing zones?
Yeah, LZs are called landing zones.
So they designated your camp area or whatever, your fire base, as a LZ designation?
Because helicopters would land there.
Okay, so when you're going onto a combat assault, it's just a general term, LZ, they were heading into the landing zone or whatever, whether it's hot or not.
Yeah, when we do a combat air assault, you're not landing in an area that's secure. You're landing wherever they land, and generally with our battalion, it was in enemy-controlled territory.
I don't know if we talked a lot about the combat assaults and the actual missions. We talked a lot about combat and experiences you had, but do you remember your first combat assault? And were you, quote, infantry at that time, or machine gunner? What were you doing? And was Jim with you?
Jim was with the mortar team,
okay,
and I was carrying an M60. And when we, the first, I cannot remember the first combat air assault we did. I don't know, I don't think it was in the Quezon Valley, because we were walking out the gate of LZ Ross. So I think it was, then we went north to Quang Tri, and then from Quang Tri we took trucks down to Camp Evans, which was a huge facility, or what wasn't big when we got there, because we arrived, we were the first battalion to go there, the first Cav battalion to go there. And when we got there, the Marines left and they went back north. And then shortly after we arrived, we were sent out to do sweeps in the area and things like that. And then we were sent down to Way, which I just alluded to that a minute ago. When we returned to Camp Evans after the Way event, it turned into this enormous facility with, I mean, I couldn't believe how different it was in such a short period of time. There were lots and lots of Cav people there, a couple thousand at least, if not more. So Camp Evans was where, and then after Way, we had a stand down for 3 or 4 days while we got a bunch of new people. And then I remember doing a combat air assault after that, but I couldn't tell you. I was towards the mountains, because we were out in lower levels of the ground was just rolling hills. But then we did a combat assault, but when we landed there wasn't anybody there, so Yeah, I was okay with that.
So most of your time was on the ground. You weren't going in and out of insertions into combat.
Later on, we were.
Oh, you did start doing some of
Yes,
that.
then we started doing that more and more. And
Had you ever seen a Huey helicopter in your training, or just when you got to Vietnam?
yeah, they had Huey helicopters fly over us down at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and they also had them in Texas.
Did you do any training in and out of the Hueys?
No, not till we got to not till we got California, not till we got to Vietnam.
Okay. And what an iconic. I mean, I tell you, like I said earlier, I feel like I've been on a Huey with all of the stories I've heard. I feel like I've landed on a beach from a landing craft, an LCVP, but I'm just so intrigued by the mode of transportation and the role of the Huey helicopter. But okay, I know we're bouncing around a bit, but that's fine. I am interested.
Well, I would like to
go
talk about the Huey helicopters.
Yes, I want you to talk about it.
Those guys, extraordinary bravery. They were our umbilical cord to life. They brought us the things we needed, ammunition, food. They took us into locations that when we would go in, they would get all shot up and somehow. In fact, when we were in Hue and we were surrounded, and those helicopter pilots that volunteered to try to get to us, there are a number of articles about when they would return back to Camp Evans, they were deemed unflyable and they had to ground them. They wouldn't let them fly anymore because they were shot up so bad when they were trying to get into us that way. Extraordinary bravery. I just have such admiration for those people that were in the Huey helicopters because they just did some amazing things. In one situation when we were in a very, very thick three canopy area, it's 3 different levels of elevation, the combat engineers rappelled down to our location and blew up trees and things so that the helicopters could get down to us. Well, if you can imagine a tunnel through the vegetation that goes down, and then it went to an angle this way, and then it went back to an angle this way, and then it came down to where all the vegetation was laying. They couldn't even get on the ground. They had to hover. So these helicopters dropped down in this hole, the ends of their blades hitting the vegetation, went this way and then this way and dropped down to where we were and then hovered while they kicked everything out, ammunition and food or whatever, and then went back up and then and it was just 2 or 3 of them did that one after another, and I just thought, oh my God, those guys are nuts. That was just an amazing thing. And I was standing under them, watching them come down because I was supposed to help unload the chopper at that point. And I watched up with them, at them in awe of their ability to control that machine the way they did. It was...
When these are, by today's standards, these are kids, they're young men, and
early 20s.
You know, and they're aircraft commanders, and they're making life and death decisions, and I mean, I've had comments like they were full of piss and vinegar, and they were I had one gentleman, a combat photographer, started out with the 82nd Airborne, was wounded, went back into the field, did 200 combat assaults as a photographer, 173rd Light Infantry Brigade, John Hosier from Missouri. I said, tell me about the Huey helicopter, and with tears coming down his eyes, he says, they were a gift from God.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I seem to recall that I did 25 or 26 combat air assaults, and probably 18 of them or 20 of them were into hot LZs, meaning you're getting shot at when you go in. But I don't know that that's accurate. That's just what I remember. I mean, it was a long time ago.
Is there a particular combat assault, or they call them CAs, whatever? Is there a particular one that maybe was more difficult, or where you remember more? And I'm assuming there's 6 or 7 troops on that ship. I mean, do you remember any of those assaults?
The one I remember, and the things I remember are when the tracers are going by my head. Those are the ones I remember the most. But we were in the lead chopper. The choppers were in a V formation. We were coming into the LZ. It had been prepped with artillery heavily. In fact, some of the dust was still settling as we came in. and we started taking heavy ground fire. Well, I always rode on, as the chopper was going forward, I always rode on the right-hand side because I'm right-handed, and I would stand on the skid as we were coming in, and there's the outside layer and then an inside layer of skin in the helicopter, and the inside had holes in it. Well, I'd put my hand through one of those holes to hold on. I would stand on the skid, and the door gunner would be firing his M60, and I would be firing my M60. So both of us were firing, and we're watching these tracers come up, and you can hear them. They hit the helicopter twice, in the bottom and the top, and they go ping, ping as they go through it. As the chopper was coming in, it got hit, and it started smoking. And it veered a little bit. Well, we're about 8 or 10 feet in the air. Well, I jumped off. Some of the guys jumped off. Not everybody, but a couple of them jumped off. And maybe everybody did, I don't remember. I think there were 6 guys on the chopper, 6 combat guys on the chopper, I think. And they jumped off. Well, we were in elephant grass, it was pretty deep. Well, we were taking such heavy fire that helicopter took off, and the rest of them took off. And we were there by ourselves. Nobody else, the other choppers hadn't landed yet. And so I watched them, and I'm not having good thoughts at that point. And I watched them as they went between the low hills. They went through a saddle, and I heard them go around. Well, while we were on the ground in this elephant grass in this small valley, the artillery came in and started pounding the place again on the side that we were taking all of the hits, all of the ground fire from. And so they peppered that again, and the helicopters went around this hill, and then they came back in, and the one I was on that was smoking was already empty, I guess, because I didn't see it again. And then the rest of them came in, and I went, oh, thank you, God. I don't want to be here by myself. And what I do remember is I had a kid that it was his first battle. He was brand new. And when I jumped out, I grabbed him and pulled him out with us because his face was like, what is going on here? This is not, his mind was not really processing what was going on. And I pulled him out with me. And so anyway, we're on the ground, and then the artillery peppered the place really close to us. I mean, within 50 yards. And we're all down while that's going on, and you can hear the shrapnel, which sometimes whizzes. It has a as it goes along, and it would go through the grass and cut the grass off above us. I mean, it was pretty exciting times. And I just got this kid, just got him laid down, and all of us were quiet. Nobody shot. We were just real quiet. And then the choppers came back around and landed, and then we set up. Then we had enough guys to, we had a company. It wasn't a battalion, it was just a company. And we were able to set up a perimeter and then start calling in fire. And the gunships, the helicopters that were gunships came in, started strafing the area, and then we were able to drive the enemy out.
I know it's been a long time ago, but I mean, and you tell your story so vividly, but you got to remember, I mean, I'm trying to think what I went through that, you know, now for you, gosh, what we're talking about, help me with the math, 67, 68 now, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, it was the year, that was January, February, March, and April of 68.
So we're talking 56 years ago now?
Yeah.
And when I interviewed you the first time, 56, 46, about 38 years ago, okay. In my own life, I think of things, but, you know, if we could slow it down and go back, and I'm always intrigued by time travel, by the way. My first rock and roll band was The Time Machine, so H.G. Wells, Somewhere in Time,
there you go.
The whole, okay. The pickup on the tarmac, the anticipation of the I'm assuming that the Hueys come in when you're going for an insertion like that. Probably there's several or more that come in, they land, and then you get into one, and then you take off,
yeah.
And you're going. I bet it's probably just minutes till your destination, right? Or is it?
Well, first of all, where we were, there was no tarmac. It was just dirt.
Okay.
And the helicopters would come in, but before the helicopter, but within 30 minutes or less, the first shirt would come around, the first sergeant would come around and go, saddle up, we're moving out. So everybody'd get their gear and get saddled up, and we'd move over to the area where we knew the helicopters were going to
Is the adrenaline starting like it is in me as you tell this?
I don't remember.
Okay.
If you recall in my interview before, I reached a point where I just became calloused. And, I just assumed I was going to get killed, so I was going to do the best I could until I got killed.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's
So
fine.
the first sergeant says saddle up?
Yep. So we get our stuff and move to where the helicopters are going to come in. And
How far out can you hear them? Can you like way in the distance?
you get to where you know how far away they are when you hear them, because when they're extracting you, that's a big deal. When you're moving out of a danger and being in a helicopter and you're going up to where you're not going to be shot at, it's a great relief. When you're saddling up to go out, you don't know where you're going. My rank was stand here, shoot that way. And they don't tell us, they just tell you, get on the chopper, we're moving out. So when the choppers would land and the guys would get on the choppers and they would separate the platoons, space them far enough apart that the helicopters, of course, could be spread out. And you knew that when the helicopter landed in front of you, that's the one you're getting on. But you didn't know where you were going. You weren't really sure what was going to happen. You just didn't know.
Did you say hi to the pilots? Probably not.
No.
Probably no interaction with the pilots, right?
They were probably had as much adrenaline running in their system as we did.
But you knew they were there, and thank God for them, and
Oh yeah,
get us in here safely.
they're amazing, amazing people.
Who tells you it's a hot LZ before you lift off or during the flight? You're being told it's a hot LZ.
No,
You don't know.
no.
Oh.
You don't know until the choppers are going in. Because it may have been an occupied by enemy LZ when you left in the helicopters, but by the time you get there, they might be gone.
Is there some type of commander on each ship, or is it just?
No.
The grunts are here, and there's no necessarily the first sergeant. He probably comes on the last one or the first one.
For whatever reason, I was always in a different chopper. The time I told you about, I was in the first one. Generally, I was in the third, fourth, fifth chopper that went in, not the first one. At that time, I was in the first one. But when we went in, I was always prepared. I was always standing on the skid, hanging on, and had the M60 with 100 rounds in it, ready to let it spray the area if I needed to. And what I would do is look for flashes. And when I'd see the flashes, I would pepper that area. Same thing the door gunner in the helicopter did. He would look for flashes, and that's what he would shoot at.
Are you wearing any ear protection?
No.
No, seriously, no?
You don't have time for that.
That would have taken a toll on your ears.
Yeah, well, the hearing aids are proof of that.
So help me, is it, or is it, I mean, what's that sound of
The
that?
60 is a little slower than an M16. An M16 is a rapid fire. It shoots real fast. You'll go through your 20 rounds in a heartbeat. But the 60 doesn't put out the rounds as quickly, but it also doesn't run out of rounds. It keeps firing, and it's a bigger bullet. And so that's why it was a target for the enemy, is you try to take and we tried to do the same thing. We would try to take out an enemy position where the heaviest fire was coming from. And so that's what you try to end that firing.
So that was your job, to fire the M60? So you were a gunner?
On the ground.
What about on, okay. Are you firing an M60 handheld, or are you firing the one that's in the helicopter?
I'm standing outside the helicopter, hanging on with one hand.
Okay.
I've got the M60 in my right hand. I've got the end of it under my arm.
What's it, the picture of you that I used for the thumbnail for the video, is that an M60?
That's an M60.
Okay. But does the helicopter have mounted machine guns?
Yes, those are the door gunners. They sat in a chair, one on each side. They were in a chair with a mounted gun in front of them with big boxes of ammo attached so they wouldn't run out. I only had the amount of weight that I could carry So about 100 to 150 rounds that were just dangling down as I was firing.
If you run out of that and you hit the ground, you don't have no more ammo?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you've got more?
Yeah. Multiple soldiers carried bandanas of M60 machine gun.
So were there two gunners on that ship, on these ships, or just one on the Hueys?
The door gunners,
Yeah.
there's one on each side.
Okay, so there's two.
There's always one on each side.
You said artillery would prep an area, but wouldn't the Cobra gunships go in too?
Sometimes they did. 90% of the time they were there to prep the area. And as the war went on, then they became more prevalent. They would be there, the artillery would stop, the gunships would go in, and then we would go in. But in the early part of '68, before the Army had learned that process, we would go in after the artillery prepped the area without a gun, sometimes without a gunship. But as time went on, the gunships were more prevalent, and then the Cobra came in, which was a wonderful weapon. And they would generally be there circling the area as we were coming in to help suppress fire or whatever. Because that time I went in without any gunships where I was in that lead chopper, that was something you think about for a long time.
Even with all that preparation or whatever, the artillery, the gunships, there's still bad guys shooting at you probably, huh?
Well, they get in these little holes in the ground, and so they're underground. So the artillery, it just blows stuff up, and it may or may not have an effect as far as getting rid of the enemy. But within 10, 15 seconds of the artillery stopping, they're all back on the ground and ready to go back to battle. They had learned what to do and made their adjustments to be available to engage us when we landed. So they knew how to, they had learned how to do that.
Is that safe, holding on with one hand and firing an M60 machine gun?
If you're going to get shot, it doesn't make any difference if you're inside or outside.
I want to cheer when you tell that story. Like Rambo, man.
Oh, no.
I'm kidding.
There are a lot of guys that did that.
I know. But Hollywood would glamorize that. Was there any glamour in that?
No.
It's survival, right?
It was survival. You're just trying to survive. You're just trying to be on the chopper until we hit the ground so you can get away from the chopper.
Were there any incidences during those combat assaults where anybody was shot getting out of the helicopter or anybody killed at that?
Oh, yeah.
There was?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me what you remember, because you didn't talk about that.
I didn't have time to look at that.
But you knew it was happening.
Oh, yeah. You see guys get hit. But you don't have time to do anything. The medic does that. That's the medic's job. My job was to get set up and form a perimeter or a line to engage the enemy. So as the guys would get hit or killed, I didn't have time for that. And that was. It's not that I didn't feel for them. I just couldn't feel for them at that time because I was trying to survive, and I was trying to. I wanted my goal was to make sure the other guys that were alive knew that they could count on me as I could count on them. I've heard it said many times, in war, there is no second place. You either win or you lose. And when we were in those situations, we were in it to win it. And so when the guys would get hit, we just didn't have time to mourn or whatever. And I know that there are some guys that their buddies would get hit and they would stop to help them until the medic got there. And that happened a lot, but it didn't happen to me. I mean, my assistant gunner got killed. I didn't have time. Now, I needed ammunition, and I had an assistant gunner that got wounded, and I yelled for medic, and while people that were other soldiers that were on the ground were taking the two belts of machine gun bullets off of them, and they would fling them over to me to try to get them as close to me as they could. And that's how the assistants got killed or wounded, is they had to go out and get that and bring it to me. So they were exposed and they would get shot. And they'd bring that over and they would snap them together so we'd have a real long belt of several hundred rounds.
Where are the medics during a combat assault? Are they on the choppers?
Oh yeah, they go in with you. And the medics they're as much as, if not more, heroic than the helicopter pilots. The things they did to help these guys under heavy fire was, their bravado was unprecedented. They are not recognized as they should be. You watch these guys, we have such heavy ground fire that you can't get up. You're laying on the ground, and they would get up and run to a wounded guy. And they didn't lay down to take care of him. They got down on a knee and did what they needed to do to take care of him. And then they'd get up and run to the next guy. And I just thought, my gosh, I'm glad I'm not a medic.
Did you ever help load wounded onto a medevac or what?
Oh yeah, wounded and dead.
What do you remember about any of that?
It wasn't pleasant, but I knew the wounded, we needed to get them on a chopper to get the chopper out of there so we could get them back for medical assistance. The medics on the ground, we called them Band-Aids, the medics on the ground just did what they could to allow the wounded to be transported. They didn't really do a lot, try to ease the pain and bandage them up, and they didn't really get help until they got back to a hospital where they got some real medical assistance.
So when those helicopters came in, dropped you off, if people were being wounded, would they circle around and come pick them up, or would they just wait and call in a medevac later or something like that?
The medevacs didn't come unless we called them.
Now those were specific Red Cross medevacs, but a lot of these ships were used as medevacs because there was nobody, they needed help. So
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Boy, this is good. This is good. I'm just intrigued the more I hear you talk about the helicopters and how they were a gift from God and how these pilots operated under, life and death situations and how you guys were in there. And I'm sure when somebody came in new, they were scared to death until, they received their baptism under fire. And then
I was one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for a guy to tell you that he wasn't, he's either lying to you or he's got a mental problem. So when you go into combat that first time, and that's an unfair statement that I just made, because some guy's introduction to combat is a sniper. So you got one guy picking at you. But when you go into a situation where you're outnumbered, it's pretty intense.
Tell me where your faith was back then. I don't remember from the first time, but did you have a strong faith in God back then?
Oh, I prayed every day. And the main prayer I did in the mornings was, God, I don't want to kill anybody today. I don't want to hurt anybody today. And then at night I would say, thank you, Father, for giving me another day. And that was about it. That's about all I said. But every day, it seemed to me, I can't remember a time that I didn't say, God, I don't want to kill anybody today. I don't want to hurt anybody today.
I've been speaking with people, and at times the comment, there's no atheist in a foxhole, and yet I met a guy recently who is an atheist, and I said, really? So we talked a little bit off the camera, but anyways, I'm just thinking, I don't know how there could be. I mean, even if you did, I don't believe in God, you get in a situation like that, come on. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean...
Yeah. I mean, what does he base his moral values on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't know. I think it takes more faith to believe there is no God than it does to believe there is one. Because there is no evidence that there's no God. But historically, the artifacts that have been uncovered, all of the things that the Bible talks about are being proven. Every year more stuff is discovered and being proven that the scripture is correct. I mean, it's accurate. There's a letter that Pontius Pilate wrote to Caesar that was discovered recently, just a few years ago. And he describes his encounter with Jesus on the streets. And when he said he walked up to this man that they called Jesus, he had golden hair And the aura was so powerful that Pontius Pilate's feet were stuck to the ground. He couldn't walk and he couldn't talk. He didn't even know how to communicate with this person. And in the letter, which is on the internet, you can look it up and listen to it, he says that this man is truly not of this world, is what he said.
Yeah, I agree. There's too much evidence to prove otherwise. I mean, you know, it would take more faith to not believe. And your story again, Jerry, is very compelling. I'm just really touched by what you're saying. It's like when I talk to you, we're back in Vietnam, and I feel like I'm there with you. And so
I'm glad you weren't.
Well, yeah, I know. I've had veterans tell me that.
At your size, you would have been a tunnel rat.
Really?
And that wouldn't have been good.
I don't like that word, tunnel rat.
Yeah, that was...
I don't want to go into small holes and chase the enemy.
Those guys, they'd take a 45, crawl down in those holes, never knowing whether they were going to come out or not. There were so many booby traps, poisonous snakes, punji pits that were inside the tunnels. I don't know how they did it. I mean, I went to high school with a kid who was a tunnel rat, and he's pretty isolated. His social circle is pretty small.
I've heard through my stories over the years, through all wars, that at times when men die in the battlefield, they're calling for God or their moms.
That's right.
Did you ever hear anything like that?
Oh, yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, all the time. Especially when we were putting them on the choppers, and you'd hear them. And if they were dying in the field, which I've been next to people that were dying, and you'd hear them call for their mom. And it's pretty sad. It's enough to make you cry. If you weren't so involved in the event that was taking place in the firefight, you just hold on to them, and you know, what can you do? You can't do anything. You just watch the life go away. It's heartbreaking. And you'd see guys that were just blown apart. I mean, their insides were blown out, and their lungs or their legs are gone or whatever. And it's not something you forget. And that's one of the things I know medics have a harder time coming home from Nam or any combat than the rest of us do. Yeah. Because they see all that stuff. And that's what I was talking about Jim Gavin. I'm sorry.
Davis?
Jim Davis. Jim Davis had to take those body parts and put them in that, you know, and he said he didn't know what parts went with what person. He just put them in there and covered them up. And I wish you could interview Jim.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Let's see if we can set that up at some point. Did you watch Brian Bartlett's story, the medic that I interviewed at my home about last fall?
Yeah.
Well, he came down from Reno, and he had emailed me several months earlier that he wanted to tell his story before he dies. I've had that several times. And that story really has hit a nerve too with a lot of people, veterans, just people out in the community. And well, I'm not going to go into all that, but I'm just saying it because what you talked about the medics, you know, that they came home with all of that.
Well, when you watch the video you can look at him. He's not he carries a lot of burden. I felt for him because I know what the burden he's carrying because I've been there, not as a medic, but I've seen what he had to deal with, and that's ongoing. I mean, it's not like you're a medic for one battle. You're there for the duration or until they kill you. And I don't know what the death rate of medics were, but it was pretty high.
Yeah. So through your Vietnam, the combat, you said you became, I forget the word. Did you say numb? What was the word you used?
Calloused.
Calloused to where you thought you're probably going to die? You're just waiting for that bullet or whatever?
Yeah. Our battalion was an assault battalion, and we were often sent into situations that I wish that they'd sent other battalions into, but we were generally we were the first ones in.
But I think Doc Bartlett said the same thing. He said he was just dead inside. He just figured he was going to die. So, to me, to survive, you almost have to have that mentality, don't you? I mean, if you went out every day scared for your life, you'd be a nervous wreck.
The feeling that you're going to die when you come home from Nam never goes away. You just, I mean, my first marriage, I lived like I wasn't going to live. I mean, just next day is, I'm probably not going to make it to the next day, even though I was in an environment that was not dangerous, or relatively so. And the divorce was my fault. She's a wonderful person. She just shouldn't have hooked up with me because I wasn't ready. And I got married within a few months of being home, and or maybe 18 months. And I just was not a good person to be around. I had not made the adjustment. I wasn't mean. I just couldn't be confined to a location. I couldn't stay in the house. I couldn't be in the neighborhood. I had to be out all the time. And I wasn't an alcoholic, so I wasn't drinking. I wasn't a drug guy, so I didn't fall into the drugs. I just had this need for adrenaline, and I wasn't getting it. And and through my life, I've done a lot of things for the adrenaline rush, a lot of sports and things that are all about adrenaline, and never gotten that rush again. It just never comes back. But fortunately, I've made it this far, and a lot of that need is gone. I don't have the need to jump off cliffs anymore.
Well, I had one guy, Rick Coates, one of my veterans. He was a Marine, and he said that adrenaline rush wasn't there, and that's why he got in scrapes with the law, why he drank.
That's right.
And he just couldn't. And then I've had other veterans, Lee Alley, a recon lieutenant from Wyoming, Wheatland, Wyoming, say, you know, the nights were the worst. He says, you know, at the nights, it's like the demons come out. And he says, you couldn't turn the switch off. He didn't know how to turn the switch off.
Right.
And he, you know, just comments like that over the years. You probably can relate to that. So do you suffer with PTSD?
Yes.
Are you disabled as far as the VA is concerned?
Almost every night where I'm laying in bed, the sweat is so bad I have to get up and wait for the sheets to dry out. It's 50 years plus years later. Every night since I've come home, I'm up at least twice a night doing perimeter check, locking the doors, making sure the windows are locked. I looked out the windows, and I've done that every single night since I came home. That's never changed. Have lights on, not in the house, but outside, so I can see when I look out. My wife doesn't understand. I mean, she a little bit, you know. She goes, I understand how hard it is to walk away from something that has that much drama and how traumatic that is. But you'd think after 50 years that'd start to subside, but the only thing that's gone away is I don't have the nightmares like I used to. I used to have some just terrible nightmares, and they were generally about, as those documents I gave you talked about, we were in hand-to-hand combat. That's generally what I would dream about, was the hand-to-hand, because that's not a black eye in the parking lot, high school parking lot. I mean, it's intense, and that's what wakes me up, is someone attacking me up close.
I don't think you talked about that in your first interview.
I did not.
We don't have to now, unless there's something you want to share about that. If you don't, I'm not going to.
It's just part of the PTSD. A lot of veterans have it.
But not many people I've met have been in hand-to-hand. Maybe in Korea, So we're talking VC, up close, personal, and NVA or
NVA.
Wow.
I don't ever remember seeing VC. Up in I Corps along the DMZ, they were trained, well-trained military troops that we encountered.
So are we talking fixing bayonets, can I ask, when you talk about hand-to-hand, or? Is that something?
No, we didn't have bayonets.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure that some of the guys did. I didn't carry one.
Yeah.
And I can't shoot an M60 machine gun because it's indiscriminate, kills everybody. So you're not aiming it at somebody. So when we were in the hand-to-hand combat, most of it was the enemy charging us. And they got to the line where we had set up, and I'm no longer in the foxhole. I'm up on the ground along with everybody else. And it's called the broken arrow situation when they've overrun the position. That happened at LZ Leslie, which was the one I told you about. And then it happened again, but I couldn't tell you where it was. I just don't remember.
That means a unit's being overrun? Is that what the broken arrow?
A broken arrow is when you no longer have command of the LZ that you're on.
Okay.
It's now been taken over or is in the process of being taken over by the enemy. Okay. That's a broken arrow situation.
Okay.
And when that happens, then help comes from everywhere. And if it's at night, it's different than if it's during the day. When we had a broken arrow situation in the daytime, when that happened to us during the day, then the jets and the planes came in, and I mean, it was amazing how quickly all these people that I didn't even know were in the area, and I mean, all of a sudden they come in large numbers.
Yeah.
The jets and the gunships, and then additional troops come in. It's pretty amazing what they do to help us when they can.
God bless you, brother. We're talking about hand-to-hand combat. I just want to end on, okay, I have critics. Everybody's got critics. So some people comment and they go, well, you should have let him keep talking. You shouldn't have interrupted him. So I've been letting you talk, so nobody should be saying that. But there's times where people want me to kind of go deeper into a story, like, hand-to-hand combat. I'm not going to do that. That's not me. But all I can do is imagine broken arrow. You're going to be overrun here. I'm assuming broken arrow brings in the airstrikes. Am I correct?
Yes.
Scramble the F whatever they are, the jets, and
whatever's available. Whatever's available and who's closest to us. Come to your aid.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I'm imagining no bayonets, so you're either hand fighting, using whatever you have, or your guns or whatever. But that would be brutal, man. I'm sorry you've suffered with that at night and things, and I hope this doesn't trigger any of that thing. But that's part of war, huh? War is hell.
Yep, it sure is.
I want you to comment on the story you told in your first interview about how you reached that point where you knew it was a defining moment in your life where you realized, you with tears, what's happening to me, and you became an animal, you said. And then you had that incident where you were taken off the line and you're at the mess hall and you're scooping the potatoes and the chicken wing and all that. Comment on that story. You don't have to tell it again, but just comment on how that shaped, just that whole story, getting to that point. Can you comment a little bit on that? You know what I'm talking about. That was an intense story.
I was, I believe at that, I don't know for a fact. I'm guessing. But I believe my state of mind at that point in time was one of just total distrust. We had commanding officers, not at the battalion level, but up the ladder, generals and colonels that made decisions. put us in very precarious situations without the correct. I mean, the decisions they made were just, I mean, even at the bottom of the barrel that I was, I could tell that, I could see that this was just really stupid. I mean, how could somebody who has that much authority over you make such stupid decisions? It just amazed me. If it wasn't for our battalion commander, Colonel Sweet, who was a true hero, there are several times that we would have been wiped out. And his leadership is why we weren't. And yet he would be reprimanded by people up the ladder for doing something he shouldn't have done because they gave him an order to do something else. But the order they gave us to do that something else was death for everybody. And our battalion commander on the ground could see that, and he would tell those people over the radio, and it fell on deaf ears. And yeah, I'm sure there's situations where the encounter we were being sent into was important, but generally they were not. So I had this distrust, and most combat vets, not all, I'm sure, there's always exceptions, but most combat vets carry an anger around, if bordering rage. And so when you see the prisons with combat vets in them, those guys have a rage that they can't control. And or they kill themselves, or they become alcoholics, or they become drug addicts, or all the above. There needs to be a way for the military, when you come home from combat, that they take time to put you in a situation where you can adjust. It may at least make some kind of adjustments where they have an opportunity, where the government has, the military has an opportunity to identify those guys that have been more affected than others. I haven't been a violent person or an alcoholic or a drug addict. I just was always looking for that adrenaline. I can't stand people that don't follow the law. The law is there to protect all of us. And yet you go out on the street and you watch people just blow off the law all the time. Yeah, it's not important. Yeah, it is. It's a structural thing. And that disappoints me. I don't have a problem walking up to somebody that's parked in a handicap spot and they are not handicapped and they don't have a handicap plate or whatever. I'll go up to them and I go, excuse me, I'm a combat veteran and I've seen guys without legs or without arms or whatever, and it's not as easy for them to get from the other end of the parking lot because you're so selfish, you took their space. And I've had people flip me off or just yell at me and call me names. They just don't care, and that's extremely disappointing to me. If I were one of those guys that had the kind of rage that I've seen some guys have, it wouldn't be a good situation. They would get to park there and I'd be arrested. But through the years, I've learned to recognize it for what it is and keep it in a can.
But that story you told, I mean, you were at a point where you had realized something radically has changed in your life, and you said everybody was looking at you. You're mashed potatoes and the chicken.
Well, I was in an MP place.
Yeah.
And they were all spit shine and polished. I mean, they were looking good. And I was taken out of the field. We were on a combat mission, and I was lifted out of the field and brought back. And I still had all my stuff, all my combat stuff. So I'm sitting at this table. I've got my backpack next to me. I've got my M16 at that time. Had an M16. I had it laying in my lap. You've got to have it because you just don't know when you're going to get hit. And I have isolated myself like a dog would guard its food. I'd had C rations for months. So I'm guarding this food while I'm eating it. And situational awareness, I know that the place is quiet at this point. There's nobody talking. And when I looked up and everybody was looking at me like, what the heck happened to that guy? And there was an MP sitting next to me, and he said, come with me. We can come back. The mess hall's open all day. All day? You gotta be kidding me. That's wonderful. I didn't say that, but that's what I thought about. And he took me off to a barracks. I got in the shower, and I think I've told this story before. I used all the soap. I just washed and had hot water, and I just scrubbed and washed, and I washed my hair, and I had a little bottle of shampoo, and I used all that shampoo, and I just washed and washed. Well, when I came out, my clothes were gone, and I had new clothes there, which was nice, because mine were pretty beat up. I had new boots, socks, everything. I had taken the M16 into the shower with me and put it in the corner. I wasn't going to be where I couldn't get it. I just had too much stuff happen in the field. We had so much combat. And there's lots of books written about it. And the declassified documents that I gave you, when you read those, I know they talk about the hand-to-hand, the different things that had happened. And you're going to, I think you'll be amazed at just how much combat my unit had over that 4.5-month period. I couldn't tell you, I mean, other than I just had turned into something I didn't recognize. So now I'm out of the shower, I've got the M16, the guy says, you don't need that. I said, I'm not giving it up. And it wasn't until I met a captain later that day, and he said, we're going to issue a new weapon. You go over to the armory and you turn that in, they're going to give you a new weapon. And then I changed weapons at that point. I got an M14. Still didn't know where I was headed or what was going on at that point. Okay. Anyway, I just didn't know what had happened to me. I just knew that I had withdrawn to the point that, and I was kind of a don't tread on me, you know, don't push this thing. And fortunately, the compassion of this guy that was sitting next to me saw that, and he kind of helped me that rest of that day. Went back and ate with me, and now I'm in clothes. I still got my M16, and I'm eating normally at that point because there wasn't a lot of people in the cafeteria. He said something along the lines of, you know, all the food you want is here. You don't need to protect it or whatever. He said you can take small amounts and go up as many times as you want. And so I kind of absorbed that at that point in time, and that's when I was really trying to figure out what happened to me. How did I become this person that was not me? I mean, I'm not that kind of person, and yet I mean, there were several guys in our unit that had the same problem I did. Yeah. We just had so much that we just couldn't escape it.
Yeah. Tell me about your last day in Vietnam. Do you remember your last day?
Well, when I left, when I was assigned the M14, the next day I was told I was going to a place called Phan Rang Beach. My war was over, essentially. And there were several of us in the battalion that they took out of the battalion and reassigned to safer areas, especially those of us that had been through all of those combat scenarios and survived them. So I ended up out at the beach. Well, it's a 40-mile drive from Cam Ranh Bay on a really nice paved road with white line. It's just like being back in the States. And I go to the beach. So now I'm on the beach with a bunch of incorrigibles. They just didn't fit in anywhere else. And I think there were 40 of us. And our job was to guard an R&R beach. Really? It's a beach. The enemy's going to raid the beach, so the guys can't go swimming because Phan Rang Air Base was just a couple miles away. So anyway, I ended up at this beach. And my last day, two things happened. We had gotten a new lieutenant that was in charge of these 40 guys. And he was a John Wayne. He was going to win the war and get medals and move up. And he was an interesting guy. Well, he had a problem because he had 40 guys that really didn't care. I mean, he had his work cut out for him. Well, for whatever reason, he and I did not get along well at all. I was the only combat guy there. Everybody else were just guys that didn't fit in, were troublemakers, were at the unit they were with, so they took him and moved him out to this place. And I got along with him pretty well. I didn't have any boundaries, so I got along with him well. But anyway, this lieutenant calls the company together. There were 40 of us, and he calls us together and has everybody at attention, and he pulls me out front because the daily Jeep with the MPs that comes out there brings mail and takes mail back, and they're runners back and forth. So they come out to the beach where we are. They're going to take me back with them to Cameron Bay, where I'm going to go home. So I throw my duffel bag or whatever I had. I think it was a duffel bag in the back of the Jeep, and I get in behind the driver, and I have my M14. Well, before I got in the Jeep, the lieutenant called me over in front of everybody, and he said, now everybody knew I was going home. I'm out. It's my turn's over, except this lieutenant. And he stands me up in front of everybody, and he says, I just want you to know that I was an E4. I wasn't a PFC. I was an E4. I was a specialist 4th class. He says, when he comes home from his 30-day leave, I've put in a request that he goes back to the field of combat where he belongs. Well, everybody started laughing. And then he yelled at him, and they stopped. He thought that this lieutenant thought that he was punishing me by sending me back out in the field. And everybody was laughing because they knew when I got home, I'm out. My turn's over. I'm out of the military. So that part was hilarious. So now we're driving back towards Cameron Bay. Well, off to our left side, we're going south to north towards Cameron, and off to our left was an ARVN or Vietnamese army fighting some VC. And they're about a quarter mile away from us, half a mile at the most. And bullets are coming over us occasionally, and I'm down and I've got the duffel bag over there, and these two MPs stopped, and I said, what are you doing? Get out of here, get out of here. And they said, well, we've never seen combat. So my M14 was not loaded, but he didn't know, the driver didn't know that. And I put that M14 up behind his head, and I said, you get going or this is it for you. And he goes, you don't know what's gonna happen to you. And he starts screaming at me or whatever, and we leave. Well, we get into Cameron Bay, and these two MPs escort me from the Jeep into the company commander, the captain's office, and they tell him all these things about how I threatened their lives and whatever. And this captain is sitting there with his cowboy boots on the desk. He's got a cowboy hat on, and he's wearing glasses like pilots wear. And he's sitting there looking at him, and he had a magazine he was looking at. And so they tell him their story, and he goes, well, you two are dismissed. He says, McNelly, sit down. So I sat down in the chair on the other side, and I mean, it couldn't be better than this. I mean, this is a movie kind of stuff. He puts his hat back, or he opens a drawer, he gets a bottle of Jack Daniels and puts it on the table on his desk, takes the top off, puts his cowboy hat off, pulls his eyeglasses down and looks at me, and he goes, it's me, Red. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me. Well, I had lived in an apartment where there was a Hell's Angel that lived there that was what they called Red. And he had this big red, like afro hair and beard. You couldn't hardly see his face. And for whatever reason, we got along well. He just kind of took care of me, while we were at the apartments. And one day he was gone. Well, he'd been drafted. He had a degree in psychology. And when he got his degree in psychology, he dropped out and joined this MC group. So he's in the There he is. Now he's the captain of this, but he's spit, shine, and polished. I didn't recognize him. And so he opens the bottle and he puts it over there and he goes, so tell me what happened. And I told him what happened. And he says, I command a bunch of friggin' idiots. He said, you just can't believe these guys. And he says, they do a great job, but they just don't have a clue. And so anyway, he and I got drunk and spent the day together. And the next morning, and we went to dinner and I ate in the officers club with him and nobody said anything and kicked me out, you know, because I guess he told them if somebody said something to him, he said, no, he's with me and whatever. And then the next morning he took me over to the flight that I was supposed to catch out of Vietnam and he drove me right up to the group that was getting on the plane and that was it. That was my last day.
Okay.
My last 24 hours.
Did you have any of the anti-war protesting when you came home anywhere?
Oh yeah, I had a heartbreaking situation.
Tell me about it.
I left, I flew into Fort Lewis, Washington when I came back and I was discharged. And they gave me a uniform with medals on it and I knew nothing about them. I didn't know why I had those. I certainly didn't deserve them. I didn't do anything. Everybody in my unit were just heroes. I mean, they were just amazing guys, what they did, kids. So anyway, I'm discharged. I can't get a flight home until the next day. Well, I'm out of the military. I don't want to be there anymore. I don't want this anymore. So I went down to the airport and I got a connecting flight in San Francisco. So, but I had about a 2-hour layover. So I have a little bit of money from travel money or whatever. So I get a ticket, I fly, and I leave the airport within an hour. I'm out of Seattle and I'm away from that, but I'm dressed in my dress greens. I get down to San Francisco and I go into where the gate was. I check in and I go to where the gate was for my connecting flight. Well, there was a policeman standing watching me while I'm sitting in the chair, I don't know why he was there, but he was watching me. And I'm reading a magazine, waiting for my plane. And this guy comes up with the long hair and whatever and starts yelling at me and he's standing right in front of me and he's yelling and screaming and the policeman is watching and he's calling me a baby killer and all this kind of stuff. And everybody, there's a whole bunch of people there. And so I put the magazine down and I stood up and I looked at him and I said, you know, yesterday, day before yesterday, I was killing people. You might want to step back. Well, I still had that 1,000-yard stare in my eyes. Well, being as brave as he was, he backed up and said some things as he was walking away. That didn't bother me. There's a lot of people especially today, I mean, you look around today, there are a lot of people with a lot of issues. But the one that hurt, there was a woman that walked by with 2 little kids holding their hands. And as they walked by, they were as close as your camera is to me. And she said, you see that uniform? You stay away from those people. They kill children. And that broke my heart. She had no freaking clue what she was talking about. She had been indoctrinated just the way the Democrats are today. They refuse to look at reality and the facts and the truth. And that's why they support that moron that's in the White House. I mean, he's a danger to our country, but they don't care. They've been, the term is gaslighted. So anyway, that's what that woman did, and that was very hard, and that stuck with me for a long time. So when I got back to Phoenix, I got to my home, my parents' home. I hung the uniform up. I pushed it in the back of the closet, and I put on my civilian clothes, and I didn't talk about it for years. There was only one incident where the grade school with the outdoor basketball courts are at the end of the block where my parents lived. And I have several brothers, and so we all went down there to play basketball. And there were some of the guys I grew up with. Well, some of the guys were on the other team, and my brothers and I were playing together, and we're playing, and one of them was getting real physical with my little brother. And this is when I recognized that rage was still there. I went over and clocked the guy. I didn't hit him. I knocked him down, just ran into him and knocked him down. And he got up and he started saying some stuff to me. Well, now I'm outnumbered. There's 5 of them. And I was in their face. And I was an angry, angry person. And I scared them enough that they went away. Again, people are real brave while they're running away. And they said a bunch of stuff. And then that was the only, and then as we're walking back to the house, one of my brothers said, you know, you're pretty angry. And that was kind of that was the moment that I thought, wow, you know, I've never been that way before. I'd never done that kind of, I would have been nice and said, hey man, let's just play some basketball. You don't have to push us around like that. And that'd been the end of it. But that need to protect the family, man, I really, it was weird that I responded that way. And that's why I started thinking, okay, I need to get rid of this rage somehow. Well, a few weeks later, I decided that I needed to get out of the city and get away. I went to Southern California, and I lived on Moonlight Beach between Encinitas and Leucadia for a year. I worked at a construction site, the VA hospital in La Jolla, and we would work in the morning, and I'd get off in the afternoons. I'd go home and smoke weed and get stoned and spend my time alone. I surfed a lot, and I was just alone for about a year. Because I lived on the beach, I had lots of people that would come over and stay there, which I was okay with. I just didn't know who they were, you know, and as long as there was no violence, I was fine. But back in that day, you could sleep on the beach, you could have fires. I mean, you didn't need somebody's permission. So, and Moonlight Beach is a very small beach, and we would just have some great parties there. And people my hair had grown out, people didn't know I was a veteran, and it was a great time for me and I did that for a year. And by the end of that year, I thought, you know, I can't be doing this the rest of my life. And so I came back to Arizona and went back to college. And that was that period of time was so very important to my healing process. It really allowed me an opportunity to adjust to public and civilian life, and I was completely surrounded with people that had no idea that I was a Vietnam vet, so I was just treated normally. And
that transition though is tough. I mean, I can't even imagine. I think it was a book called Once a Warrior, Wired for Life.
Yep.
You know, and
I know the book.
Yeah, and just what you just described, you guys came home too fast. You know,
wasn't that written by Dr. Cantrell?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know, all the stories I've heard, one guy described it like they came home so fast that they had Vietnam dirt under their fingernails 2 days later at the dinner table.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, you know, like you said, looking for that adrenaline rush. But
that's what I talked about earlier. You can't do that.
Yeah. You
can't do that to these guys. You look in the Bible, and the Roman soldiers returned from war, and it's in the text. When they returned from war, they wouldn't allow them in the city. They had to camp outside the city walls. And during the day, the families and the relatives and the people would come out and spend the day with them, and they would take all of their combat garb and they would burn them in these big burn piles, and they would burn it all, and they would celebrate the warriors, and they would have time with their wives and their families and their friends. But at night, the families would go back into the city and the gates were closed and these people were by themselves. And that would last a couple of weeks before they were allowed to go back into the city. Mm-hmm. Well, if they could do it, why can't we?
Right.
I mean, you got to have a way to, it's just heartbreaking. I mean, the thing that you look at is the sniper that was the hero, the Navy SEAL sniper that was a hero. I mean, really a hero, and he's in Texas, and he takes a young man that has PTSD, and the young guy kills him. Mm-hmm. I go, that's not good. That's not how it should happen.
No.
Anyway.
Yep. So, well, we're just about done. If you want to, just a few minutes here, but just tell me about On and what he said to you about what An shared with you.
This is important for our Vietnam veterans, especially the combat guys. I spoke with a boy that was 13 years old when I was in Vietnam. This Vietnamese boy was 13, and he was in the city of Hue when the enemy in 1968 in January took the city. He and his family had to hide out to survive that, to not be killed. Fascinating story. Well, he managed to get someone in the United States to sponsor him. He's still a young boy. He comes to the United States. He learns to speak English. He goes to school. He goes through college, gets a degree. The whole time he's doing that, he works for the Coca-Cola company in a menial task job. Well, as the years go by, he works his way up the ladder in the corporation until he becomes, until he becomes one of the senior executives, and the board of directors want him to go to back to Vietnam and establish a foothold for the Coca-Cola Corporation. Well, he's afraid to do so because he knows they're communist and he thinks they'll kill him when he gets there, but he follows his orders. He ends up being flown into Hanoi. Well, as it turned out, Vietnam, now under communist control, wants capitalism. They want money in their country. They want jobs. They want things for the people. So he is held in a position of high esteem. I mean, they're happy he's there. They roll out the red carpet for him. Well, as time goes by and he's doing the things he needs to set up the Coca-Cola Corporation in Vietnam, that operation, he has an opportunity to have dinner with North Vietnamese generals. And one of the North Vietnamese generals had been in the military his entire life. He had spent over half of his life in the jungles in South Vietnam as a general. In talking with this general, the North Vietnamese general told this Vietnamese now man, the Vietnamese general told him that North Vietnam had been at war with different countries for 100 years, and never did they have a soldier, an army that was more formidable, that they respected more than the American soldier. They said the American soldiers had a will to fight, to stand and fight, that made it very, very difficult for the North Vietnamese, because they knew that we were not going to be second place. We were going to win. Mm-hmm. And the only reason we did not was because the Democrats were in charge of Washington, and we were told we were not allowed to go here or not allowed to go there. And otherwise, the war would have been over and I never would have been there. Yeah. I mean, I never would have even been there. Yeah. But it was a political war, and it was unfortunate that it happened. Yeah. But it made me very proud when this Vietnamese boy said that these North Vietnamese generals said the American soldiers were the most formidable, and they had great respect for them, and that they were the most formidable that they had ever encountered in all the years that their country had been at war. Yeah,
that's powerful. What I'd like to do, you've kind of already talked a little bit about it, but just a couple more minutes and we'll be done, and we'll take a picture. But just comment on the state of your thoughts about State of the Union and what you referred to with the Democrats or whatever. Just share your heart just a minute with people about our country today. I mean, even 18 years ago and now today when I interviewed you again, just share your thoughts about your concern for our country, our freedoms. A lot of people are giving up on their freedoms. We're fighting for the same freedoms today that our veterans fought for on foreign soil in our own country. And just comment a bit about our country today and your concern.
I find it ironic that the current administration would kick out over 8,000 military people for not getting the COVID shot, and they would discharge them from our military, and then they would open the southern border and bring in millions of people that they have no idea what their diseases are, and they don't require them to get a shot, and they spread them throughout the country. Why the Democrats can't see this, I don't know. I don't know what's going on in their head that they can't connect the dots. I understand cognitive dissonance. I know what that is. But eventually, eventually there's so much that's going on that how do they not see that? I mean, how can you not see the corruption? What is the willingness in your brain to say, I don't believe it, even though court cases and witnesses and everything you need are in place and available to see, and they just blow it off. And I'm very, very concerned. I think it's entirely possible, I don't know for a fact, but I think it's entirely possible that this is the last year that we will have the country that we have. I think we're getting real close to the end of when you go to Washington, these politicians raise their hand and swear to uphold the Constitution. Then they get there and say, well, it's an old document or it's not relevant anymore. Well, the Constitution's purpose is to tell Washington what they can and can't do. So if Washington wants you to throw it away, they must be wanting to do something that they're not allowed to do. Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I agree totally.
But I don't know what you do about it, so all I do is pray. And even that is, there are churches all over the country that are their pastors are being arrested and tried for things that are, they don't even go to jail. They just make a big spectacle out of it and then they let them go home. It's a very, very dangerous time in our country, and I feel very, very sorry for the young folks. They haven't had enough experience in life to understand what's about to happen. Mm-hmm. And because I walked a mile in the combat boots, I know how bad it can be. And I don't want to see that here. But they're potentially going to force the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear words like civil war, things like that. It's like, man, even with the border situation and, federal troops versus National Guard state troops or whatever, just a clash at the border or whatever. It's just like, we'll see, won't we? This fall is going to be
all
very...
All you do is just sit back and watch, see what happens.
I'm very concerned. I feel the things that you fought against are here in this country.
That's exactly right.
And,
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
The things that the Vietnam veterans fought against are in their own country today. When Gorbachev, I think it was Gorbachev, took his shoe off in the United States, at the United Nations, and pounded the table and yelled at our ambassador and said, "We do not need to defeat you. We will defeat you from within." And I saw that and I thought, well, you arrogant SOB, you don't have any idea. And yet here it is, right in our face. And the majority of the people in our population don't remember that.
Yeah. One of my interviews in 2005 was with a Catholic priest. He was 91 at the time, Father Bradley. He was a chaplain with the 5th Marine Division on Iwo Jima. Anyways, priest for over 68 years, just very charismatic. But he says, Larry, his Brooklyn accent, Larry, he says, the enemy is already here.
Yeah.
This was almost 20 years ago. They're already among us.
Well, you remember in my first interview, I said, these people are killing the goose that lays the golden egg, and they're too stupid to see it. They don't want to see it.
Yeah.
And by the time the goose is dead, you're not going to be able to stop it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to stop, but we could keep going, but I need to get ready for my next interview. So, with that being said, could I ask you again at the end of this interview to give a salute into the camera? You're not saluting me, obviously, but and then if you want to say something, Jerry, just look into the camera And whenever you're ready.
God bless America. We pray that you bless this country and that you drive evil out.
Amen. All right, brother. I want to shake your hand, brother, on camera. I didn't do this last time, but thank you for your service during Vietnam. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for your faith in our God. And just, Jerry, just for trusting me with your story again. I'll be a good steward of it. And I love you, brother. I'll tell you on camera.
You're an exception to the rule, and I appreciate everything you do for us. Thank you.
God bless you, brother. Okay.
There's an independent film premiering tonight. It's called Vietnam Remembered. The film highlights some memories and stories from Vietnam veterans, including several from right here in the Valley. We're talking with one of the men who is featured in the film and also the filmmaker coming up.
Picked up 2-6 and the full crew off that ship. Right, go ahead. Turn out the LZ at this time.
Scooping mashed potatoes with my fingers into my mouth. And there was nobody in this place talking. They were all staring at me. And that was the time I thought to myself, what has happened to me?
Some painful memories from the Vietnam War, and in time for Independence Day, the people who helped keep this country free tell their war stories in a new independent film, Vietnam Remembered, Lest They Be Forgotten. We have a filmmaker joining us, and also the man that we just saw speaking, Jerry McNelly, is a Valley resident, and he joins us, as well as our filmmaker, Larry Capetto. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Painful, obviously a lot of emotion behind the clip that we were just listening to. Give us a little context for what you were talking about.
In that circumstance was the first time that I had been in a cafeteria, if you will, or a mess hall that had hot food. I'd been out in the jungle in combat for almost 6 months straight without a break. And so here I was taken out of the jungle and I was brought down to a base camp where I actually had food. And I did not understand the transition from being a 19-year-old naive high school kid or college kid in the streets of Phoenix, and now I had become something I just was not. The psychological effect of that experience was deep and traumatic.
Profound impacts and stages to go through. Larry, what sparked your interest in this, and what was your purpose putting this film together?
Well, you know, our veterans have served our country, and I think our society really overlooks that a lot of times. So my documentary series is aptly entitled Lest They Be Forgotten. If we don't remember, we're going to forget. Jerry's one of almost 450 veterans that I've interviewed in the last 4.5 years. In fact, I started my work here in Phoenix 4.5 years ago. I've produced 5 films on World War II, and I just am releasing my first film on Vietnam tonight. And Jerry's story is just very compelling. I'm after the personal side of war, how this changed young men and women who went to war. And Jerry's story was significant in the fact that, you know, he came back a different person. And veterans in our society, they affect all of our lives. And I'm very grateful to be here.
In all of those interviews that you've done, is there a recurring theme or a particular struggle that you see that is again and again relevant and prevalent despite what time, what age, what war?
War is hell, and freedom's not free. If we really appreciate what we have in our country, Olivia, we have to thank a veteran.
a veteran's been involved in our life somewhere, and that really personalizes the story and why we're here to honor our veterans.
And significant also now in a time of war, lessons to be learned from your experience and the other men who we see in this film?
I can't address how the other participants feel about it. What it's done for me is it's caused me or allowed me to recognize the importance of addressing post-traumatic stress disorder with the kids that are coming home today.
Okay.
And we need to be proactive rather than reactive as we were for the Vietnam veterans. If we could have something that was implemented to an educational process that was implemented to help these kids when they come home and educate their families and their loved ones and the general public so that they would be sensitive to the self-destructive behavioral patterns that can potentially surface from someone who's been in harm's way. Hopefully this video and others will help forward that effort.
We owe them that. Well, we want to let everybody know the film will be screened tonight at Desert Springs Bible Church at 7 p.m. We're going to put the information on our hotline and website so that you can get to that location. I want to thank you so much for being here.
Can I thank Hanson Mortuaries? They're making this possible, this showing tonight, and I want to thank them. They've been a great help.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, and happy 4th of July to you in particular. Thank you very much. We'll take a quick break, and then coming up, our sizzling forecast is straight ahead.